Welcome to today's webcast on creativity. My name is Athena Clayton and I'm joined by our clinical psychologist, Stephanie Beauvais. And we are very fortunate to be joined by Dr. Elzette Fritz. Dr. Elzette Fritz is an educational psychologist. She was previously a lecturer at the University of Johannesburg as part of the Department of Educational Psychology and the Faculty of Education, where she was the coordinator of the Master's Program in Educational Psychology. She is currently a private practitioner at Leeuwenhof Academy. She is also the co-director at the Milton Ericksonian Institute of South Africa. Welcome so much, Elzette. We are so happy to have you join us today.
Hi, Athena and Steph. It's wonderful to be part of, I think, a really amazing initiative that you've taken.
Thank you. We're so happy to have you here.
Okay. Elzette, it's wonderful for you to be with us. And I know in these trying times, I think we've all got quite a lot to do and a lot to take care of. So thank you so much for giving of your time. I think we're going to go straight into the first question if you can. We've been thinking as a department around the topic of creativity, especially with our little ones. And I think that this really does, it really taps into a lot of what Athena and I are often busy with at school with our kids and the kids in our developmental phases around the notion of what actually is creativity. So we're thinking around sort of a little bit of a definition, but also why is it important in terms of its development?
Thanks, Steph. I think it's extremely relevant that you are looking at the topic of creativity. So a very short answer would be creativity is to think outside of the box. It is to perceive something in a new way. It is to look at something ordinary and see the extraordinary possibilities it holds. It is not just in the domain of psychology and education where it plays a very big role. It also plays a very big role in the world of business. And what we're going to see from now on is, I think, how people are going to tap into their own creativity for problem solving. So we know that there's been reference to the 4 C's of the 21st century. And those 4 C's are communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. So it's also not just relevant for our little ones, it's very relevant, I think, for people across the different age ranges.
Wow, that's really good as a sort of an all-encompassing just one-liner, I think. I heard a couple of things in what you said, and it just strikes me in thinking that our kiddies and our older generation have to be quite enterprising with their creativity as well. It gave us quite a nice dynamic overview of what you were trying to elicit in terms of creativity. So thanks so much for that, Elzette. How would we, and I think Athena, you can also come in here, how would we help our little ones specifically as parents, as people working with small children to tap into that creativity, especially if we're dealing with kids that might not be sort of at the outset very creative in their appearance? How would we stimulate or generate that?
I think we have to be very careful, because the minute people think creativity is linked to a product, and we've got a set idea of what that product needs to look like, we're immediately putting a ceiling on creativity. And creativity and imagination goes hand in hand. And all children are born with a degree of an imagination. So when they look at the clouds and they see a pattern in the clouds, that's imagination at play. When they take that imagination and they go and look at everyday household products, and they see, but how can I take that idea and create something novel with it from what's existing? There you're putting the imagination into play, into creativity. And the word I've used there is play. So the minute we start playfully interacting with our children, we're already opening up the scope for creative engagement, not necessarily focusing on the product, because that is, I think, often the Achilles heel for imagination and for creativity. We often say all people are born creatively and until they go to school, and then they lose it because there's a value placed on your creative product instead of focusing on the process that actually, specifically during very difficult times, creates a holding space for emotions that otherwise cannot be verbally expressed.
So what I'm hearing you say, Elzette, is creativity is a very different kind of construct from your classic intelligence. So if we think about the different kinds of intelligences, what I hear you saying is that it's not actually necessary for a child to demonstrate cognitive intelligence in order for them to be creative. So it's like Pablo Picasso said, in every child there's an artist.
Yes.
That's what I'm hearing you say.
Yes, I like the fact that you touched base on the cognitive intelligence and different forms of intelligences. So whether you subscribe to Howard Gardner's idea of multiple intelligences or not, we know that people have different talents expressed in different ways. So children from a very young age will show they like to dramatize. Others like to sing and dance and move. So if we start with our child that's verbally expressive, they're our talkers. They like to talk a lot. They are often our ones that would most probably like to tell stories. They might also like to perform. They might like to develop poems. So they will start entertaining creatively using words. Then you get your other child that's quite logical, mathematical. Things need to make sense for them. They might like to engage with experiments. So what's going to happen if I put a lot of salt in one container with a little bit of water and a lot of sugar in another container with a little bit of water, and I put a string in both of those, how long is it going to take for crystals to start forming? They might want to take their Lego and see how can they construct something and how many different building blocks are they going to need. It's a different form of creative intelligence, but in a more logical, structured, experimental manner. Then you can get your child that's more inclined to want to move. They're our shakers and our movers. So they might like to dance, they might like to do yoga. They're our busybodies, they can't sit still. And for them, it's going to be a challenge during lockdown. So parents will have to think strategically, how can I get them to move in a confined space? Up the walls with their feet, with them lying down on the floor with their backs. How can we create an obstacle course in our house using string? So that's a different way of being creative. And I'm talking now a lot, so feel free to interrupt. You can just put up your hand and then I'll know I need to stop. Your child that's musically inclined, they're our singers and they want to tap rhythm. They're our little ones who at a very young age will take the Tupperware and start drumming, much to the annoyance of the parents. Those are our kids that can make musical instruments out of discarded objects. So a toilet roll can become a shaker. Bottles can also become shakers, and bigger tins can become drums. So if you give your children the opportunity to start exploring, knowing what your child's personality and temperament and likes are, and you give them a little bit of objects that you know is possibly aligned to what they like, they will be able to start creating something, provided you're not going to criticize it or just take over, because it needs to be perfect in your mind so that you can showcase it on Facebook.
Sorry for the interruption,
Yes.
Elzette. There's a couple of things I'm picking up in what you're saying. So one of them is to allow the child some agency in choosing some or a variety of different things that they might want to do in order to express their creativity. So that's really helpful for parents who might potentially struggle with ambiguity, with that ambiguity of not knowing what the product is intended to be or is going to be. Yes. What do we do in the instance where a child may not necessarily look like they are able to pick an item or an option or a choice? A child who might not be very in tune with something that can help them assist to express that creativity, what could you do as a parent or as a caregiver working with a child? How could you help a child who's maybe not as attuned to what they might want to do that could help them express that creativity?
Sometimes we do have to give our kids some ideas. So if I'm thinking about, maybe you've made some clay, because there's multiple recipes on homemade clay.
Mhm.
And your idea might be, well, today we're going to explore what we can make with clay. And for some children, that can be overwhelming. More specifically, if they're scared, they're going to disappoint you. I've often found that children will very easily say, I don't know, whilst they actually know, but they don't know exactly what you're expecting of them. So they want to please you. In that instance, I would often say to them, you know, one can do a lot of things with this. You could decide. It could be an animal, it could be a face, it could be a shape, it could just be a pattern, and maybe we just need to start feeling what it feels like. You could also perhaps just tune into what's your body telling you, because our bodies can give us many ideas of what we can create. Sometimes you might feel a part of your body that's feeling heavy. I wonder what kind of animal could be a heavy animal, or what kind of a face would go with a heavy feeling. Maybe you're feeling a lightness. I don't know where in your body you're feeling that. Maybe there's a color that could go with that. What animal or insect can you think of that goes with a light feeling? So you give them some options and ideas, but it needs to be very clear that there's no expectation. There's no right and there's no wrong. Sometimes I start rolling a ball with clay, and I say to them, and I make a couple of balls, and I say, wow, I've now made a couple of balls here. I wonder what we can do with them now. What do balls remind you of? Do you know of other things that are round? Because then kids start generating ideas. One child might say, yes, it's the sun. So yeah, it could be the sun. Wonder what color your sun's going to be. I don't know if it's going to have a face. Another child might say, it's going to be a flower. Well, that's a cool idea. We could make flowers with these. Whatever the child says, your task will be to say, that's a cool idea, and go with it and see where it goes further.
And I love how what you're really doing is also bringing in the other elements of the 21st century thinking, which is about the collaboration and the communication, and really working with your child and not trying to teach your child or to guide them, but rather to see where the process takes you. Yes. And I think it's such a mind shift for so many of our parents who, I think we live in a world where we are very task driven, we are very product driven, and it can be really challenging to just put the final product or the idea of an evaluation aside. I think we look at a final product for that evaluative purpose, whether it's to showcase it on Facebook or to show it to the grandparents or whatever it may be, that we're seeking some sort of feedback, but sometimes just to do something for the sake of doing it, and to see where the product takes us is quite rewarding.
We talk about the process and the product that's important, and that the product itself eventually can tell a story. So a very messy picture can in itself convey a story if you allow the child to give voice to it. Sometimes some kids can. For others, they can't. Once the process is finished, it's finished. They don't really have that much of an attachment to the image. It was the fun of creating it. So it's also important for a parent not to hold it too tightly, not to add more value to it than that what the child adds to it, and holding it playfully, lightly.
So you don't want to be too didactic or prescriptive as a parent, but I'm a bit stuck. So help me out, Elzette, in terms of the child expressing their creativity. Would you as a parent praise the end results? Because I know we're all in the fraternity where we kind of very careful to praise the end result, and it's more about looking at what the process was like. But I heard earlier you saying just to kind of echo for the child or reflect for them that this is a cool idea. helps them sort of be on track with what they're starting to produce. Would you, as the parent, praise the end result? How would you acknowledge the creative masterpiece at the end of it? What would you do?
There's many answers to that question. And I always ask myself, what is the shadow to any activity or any verbal expressiveness? So if I'm going to praise my child for a picture, and this is a child that thrives on praising, it means the child might want to start doing more of the same to get more praise and lose sight of the fact that it's actually about the fun and the expressiveness. It's not so much just to get the caregiver's sign of approval. Otherwise, the child's doing it for the wrong reasons, and that is just to please the adult. Now, we all do like to be praised. Children also, however, have a value system. They can see something really sucks, and you tell them, wow, that's beautiful. Some children will go with it, whilst others are going to think, huh? Doesn't look beautiful for me. That was actually just a bit of a mess, but okay. So they might start doubting you in that. I think parents need to follow their gut instinct. They know their children best. And if your child is constantly doing things just for your approval, then maybe now's the time not to constantly just give approval, but rather ask them, how was that for you? This was a lot of fun for me. I enjoyed the stickiness. I enjoyed the differentness. I enjoyed the excitement of where this took us, and emphasize the enjoyment that goes with the process, not the product.
That's helpful.
And I'm sure receiving that kind of feedback, the feedback that the time spent with them was fun, something that the parents enjoyed, is something that really resonates a lot more deeply with the child than, you know, a comment about the products itself. But getting feedback that they were fun to spend time with, that the parents enjoyed the time with them, and the process as well, but the time with the child was enjoyable, that the parent wants to spend that time with them.
That in essence would be actually paying the subconscious a gracious compliment. If you give them the message across to a child that your presence is important, the time that we spend together is valuable, they're going to remember that message much longer than they're going to remember we built the perfect something or other with toilet rolls. That activity will maybe many years later be forgotten, but they will remember the time that was spent together as something that was really worth value.
And I suppose that open-endedness with each other is in itself creative, regardless of what you're producing at the end of it. Just allowing that open-endedness with your child is creative in itself.
Yes. And I think it's also important for the parents to realize this is not a competition about who creates the best object. I often find that the competitiveness sneaks in with adults. And it's always amazing how they think it's wonderful if you can win compared with a child. And if that pops up, that and the shadow of criticism, it's not good enough. If parents can keep an eye on those two, it teaches them something about themselves as well, and their own narratives as they were growing up. And that's something that they can go and reflect on, and rather in that space with the child realize not a competition, not who produces the best, the fastest. It's how can we do something different in an alternative manner with an element of fun.
Right. So Elzette, you've mentioned parents tapping into their playfulness, their playful side, and putting aside the competition and their competitive side. And I'm wondering, how can parents get into that frame of mind? I think we're living at a time when people are under a lot of stress. There's a lot of anxiety. We are, I think, through training by our society and by our workplace, and sometimes even by our social worlds, almost we've been trained to be very task-driven, very product-focused. How can we put all of that aside and tap into that playful element of ourselves?
I think firstly for you as an adult to ask yourself, what did you enjoy playing with when you were a child? Because that's going to perhaps connect you with your own inner child. Maybe you were one of the people that liked to spend time in nature. You liked to know about new plants, you saw the bugs, you appreciated new growth. And if you can tap into that again, and you can consider your children realizing they're the product of you and your partner. So they might have some of your elements, they might have some of your partner's elements, or some of the extended family. And to identify, okay, what is it that gives my child joy? What activities could link with that? Now, at the moment, we've got a lot of discarded things. Toilet rolls being one, empty tins being another one, cereal boxes being another one, or milk cartons. So if I know, for example, I'm a planter, I'm someone that connects with nature, I can use some of those discarded products to start growing my own seedlings. There's a lot of interesting things on Facebook at the moment of how do you create your own tomatoes and your own onions and your own peppers. Now, maybe I know my child is more someone that wants to be musical. So how can we use some of those discarded products to perhaps create musical instruments? Or maybe my child is the one that wants to create stories. So how can we search for words in the grocery cupboard and make nonsense rhymes with them, for example? So if you start tapping into your own inner child, what gives you the giggles? Think about the kind of programs that you really get you laughing, or the kind of jokes you receive that really gets you laughing. It connects you again with your own free-spirited child. And from there, looking at your child and asking yourself, okay, so what does my child typically like to play with? How can we tap into that? And we all now have enough time to also go into our cupboards. So for your child that likes to dramatize, ooh, they could do wonderful role plays. They can become mommy and daddy. And they can guide the script of you being the child. And there's role reversal. You might learn a lot about yourself and about your children through role reversal.
You've done really nicely, Elzette, in responding to Athena's question, and also something I've had in my mind, which is to that just really reality test or confront that myth that creativity is just expressive arts. You know, I think you did well to highlight that there are more children that there are children that prefer to express their creativity in more logical, sequential or ordered ways. So the shopping list idea was quite nice. Have you got any more ideas for us for sort of your more scientifically orientated, more mathematically orientated kids?
We know these are our kids that like structure. They often like to organize things. So for them to actually go and look, I'm going back to the grocery cupboard. Does it make sense? Could we sort it in a different way? That in itself is problem solving. It's creative thinking. For the dads with their garages, and I'm making a gross assumption now that it's the dads, but maybe it's the moms with a garage with a lot of tools. These are our kids that like to experiment. So what can we do with some of the things that's in our, if you do have the privilege of having instruments that can create. So you've got your saw, and obviously you're not going to leave the kids to their own devices. You're going to assist them. But what can we do with these things? How can we use measurement in that? That's applied mathematics. So looking at all those things in and around the house that typically we don't have enough time for, that need some sorting, need some fixing. Our logical mathematical kids typically would find that enjoying, because if we think in the long-term trajectory, which kind of careers might they go into? And then to ask yourself, okay, how can we apply those skills in and around the house? So even just in a time when we need to budget, and if we do get something from the shop, we need to compare which one is the best bargain. Our logical mathematical kids can help us with that.
I really love the idea of tapping into the children's natural instinctive interests and just enhancing them. And also really like that you're giving us such practical examples that we can do in really daily life. Even when we are confined within our homes, I think there's so much opportunity within our homes. I like that you say we don't have to go and spend money. We can really use recyclable materials. We can use our existing cupboards, our clothes, all sorts, whatever we can find in the house. It seems like almost any item around the house can be turned into some sort of a creative pursuit.
Yeah. At a time when we're cooking constantly, cooking and cleaning, those are two of our occupations at the moment that we're investing a lot of time in, is to also get our kids involved, for our children who like different recipes, to be involved in the kitchen and to start experimenting playfully with different tastes, different spices, a different recipe a day. Involve the children in that process, provided that is something that appeals to them. If you really want to get the children and yourself very frustrated, try and get them involved in activities that really doesn't appeal to them. And you're going to get a household where the conflict is going to escalate. And now is not the time to do that. Now is the time to rather see how can we deflate conflict. So I'm thinking about if I'm making crumpets, and you've got a kid that likes to be involved in the kitchen making crumpets. How are we going to make different crumpets than the typical stereotypical round one? Let's see if we can make some creative images, long ones, triangular ones, and have some laughter in the process. And the kid that likes to clean, that's typically also my one that likes more structure and order. To rather ask them, okay, how can we do this in a better manner? And sometimes we as adults need to be open enough to realize the way we've always been doing it might not have been the smartest. Maybe our kid might have a different idea, and see what they come up with. That's innovative thinking once again.
And sorry, Athena, I see how us as parents have such a responsibility to help engender or help children express their creativity, but how we can also inhibit it at the same time. And I guess we need to be really cautious of that.
Yes. If my child...
I just have one question. Sorry, just talking about the role of parents. I think so often parents do say to children, go and entertain yourselves. And I think there's a little bit of a perception perhaps that boredom is necessary for creativity. And a lot of the ideas that you've provided us are very much parent-guided activities to some extent, in that there's a structure without perhaps a final product being worked towards, but there's still a structure, the materials are given. There's still some boundaries, as you say, when they're working with tools, there's still safety procedures that will be put in place. But how important is boredom really for creativity? Can children become creative without this kind of intervention and nurturing?
Some children can, but we have to understand, as social beings, our children learn from their interaction with other people. So there's a lot of theories that says creativity actually comes to full manifestation in the interaction with someone else. In the past, we thought you've got the very few individuals who are our creative geniuses. Then the notions changed to the individual that has a creative flair, to the point where we realize that creativity is best developed in the interaction with someone else. Some children can be creative by themselves. So our more introverted children, who has a higher intrapersonal intelligence, can actually very merrily entertain themselves. They will take a book and they'll read. They'll write in their journal. They'll color in by themselves. But the majority of children don't necessarily fall in that category. And they do therefore need the interaction with someone else to at least get them going, because in that process, there's also communication. So I'm being seen and I'm being heard, and I get new and novel ideas, and I'm validated. So I think I understand parents at the moment are going to feel really exhausted because the children are going to be with them constantly. But my experience is if you invest proper energy in a short amount of time, and you're really with that child and not on your phone or on any other electronic devices, the chances are your child will then give you a bit of time for yourself. At the moment, our biggest culprit is going to be technology.
Could you tell us a bit more about that when you say the biggest culprit is technology?
Because of the lockdown, people are anxious. There's a lot of fear. And what that does is people then go to their phones to either connect with social media, because when we are scared, from a biological, neurological point of view, we want the proximity of other people to know that we're safe. So people will now go and look for their friends. They will tap into Facebook. Others will go onto the news the whole time. So I'm very scared of the addictive properties of technology at the moment, in an attempt to try and alleviate our own anxiety, and at the same time minimizing the interpersonal connectivity you might already have under your own roof. So if I just look at how my dogs respond if I'm on my cell phone, and that's very much what happens to children, except they don't bark the whole time. They start whining or they become naughty, because our kids feel that they are left out the minute we're constantly on our phone or on our laptop. And I realize some parents have to work. That is their necessity. But if you can invest a little bit of time with your child in terms of what are we going to do, give them some ideas, perhaps start the process with them, and then there can be parallel movement or interaction. So the parent is a little bit busy with their work and the child is busy with theirs as well, specifically in households, single parent, responsible for children and have to work as well.
Right.
Useful.
Thank you. Elzette, I think I think our time has come to an end. I'm so sorry, because I think I could listen to you talk about creativity for many more hours. It's really been such a privilege to talk to you today about this topic. You've really shared some really insightful thoughts with us. So thank you so much. Steph, would you like to add anything?
I love that from this discussion, sort of my take-home message is that creativity is such a process like anything else in life. It's complete with a set of personality characteristics, with some abilities, some talents, and then I think the rest is open-ended and ambiguous, and that too can be creative. Thank you so much, Elzette. It's been wonderful having you with us. I think you are known to us as a Saheti family, both in our departments and a little more extended. And I am certain that we'll talk to you again in the future about other relevant topics as well. So thank you so much for just giving of your time so freely whenever we ask of it.
Thank you. It was lovely talking to you and sharing some of the ideas, and good luck to your Saheti community during this time, and to you as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Just going to stop that and